Matt, I appreciate you joining me. Think like a leader, man. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Of course. We had a really good conversation in our pre-interview, and I'm excited to talk about a little bit of the systems that you've created. So, I want to go back to the origin, the original story. Where did the idea for the Square management system come from? Was it born out of frustration, observation, accident? How did it come about?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like a lot of things that in life, sometimes you don't expect to do them, and you get pushed into it. And this story starts, I think, almost 8 years ago now, where I was in the midst of a career change interviewing. I had a company reach out and ask me to interview for a job overseeing almost 600 insurance agents across 4 buildings and 3 states. And they asked me how I would maintain organizational culture and systems and processes in that type of environment. And my answer, in much more elementary form, was the beginnings of the Square management system. I didn't know it at the time, but the recruiter who was talking to me said that is the most interesting response I've ever heard to that question. You should do something with that. And that's not a standard response. The irony is I finished second, so they didn't hire me. I ended up losing to someone who was already working at the company. And to be honest, sometimes the best things happen for a reason, right? Um, but that became the start, and it stuck in the back of my head. And I was like, okay, maybe I should do something with that. How do I do something with that? And there's a little bit of imposter syndrome that starts with these things. I don't boast having taken a unicorn, company public. That's not the goal of this system, of this book. It's intended for the middle market, the lower middle market, the mom and pop shop who just needs a better understanding of how to run a company. That's what I wanted to put together over time after talking to a lot of people and started refining it. One of my friends actually said, why don't you, do something with it? Why don't you try to write, maybe make it, see if there's something there, put it into an article. And I don't know how to write. So it took a lot of time. But over the time of my career and talking to a lot of companies and building companies and buying them, it started making more and more sense. I started seeing how it could work. And it really developed from there. And here we are. I finally decided to put pen to paper and finish the book, and it's coming out next year. Excited for the book to really detail how people can leverage the system to improve their company.
I love that. So, the framework, could you break it down for our listeners? What is the framework of the Square management system? Is it something that can be broken down and talked about here, or what is it essentially?
Yeah. What is the Square management system? It sounds obtuse. It's intended to be actionable almost immediately by anybody. What I wanted to do was get away from a lot of business books that talk about theoretics. We have almost this habit of copying others. In a lot of business books and methodologies, hey, I talked to 1,000 companies. I interviewed 500 CEOs. And here are the 6 aggregate attributes that you need to understand from those conversations. And those are interesting and that's helpful, but it doesn't necessarily equate to your circumstance nor your preference. What I wanted to do is I started seeing all these issues with businesses and started saying, well, you got to tell people how to fix this because that's actually the problem. We're copying somebody else. We're trying to do the right thing, but we don't know how. And as a result, we're messing it up. And so I started stepping back even further because a lot of what I do is in around M&A, it's company building and strategy, all different sides of the stool, so to speak. And what I've seen is good cultures and bad cultures and how good cultures resulted and how bad cultures resulted. And what I wanted to do is step away from this amorphous feeling of culture and say, no, it is identifiable. It can be intentionally designed. You can affect the outcome of the culture that you want, both as an individual employee and as an executive. And that was, again, the start to that question is how would you maintain culture in this unique environment with all these people, places, and things? And my answer is structure. It's actually an output of process and procedures. Culture isn't unknown. It is really simple. And the book is called The Culture of Alignment for a reason. It is the alignment between an individual's preferences, their ways of doing, how they like to work, how they would believe in doing work, and the company's way of doing work. And if you're inside that square, that box, if you're aligned to their way of doing, then you have got a great culture and an employee will sing praises. If you are outside the square or outside that box, so to speak, then you don't align. Your ways of doing are different.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make either person or the employee wrong. It just means that you don't match. And as a result, you're not going to like it as an employee. You won't fit in, you won't succeed. And so it's a symbiotic relationship between the employee knowing how they like to work and a company actually adhering and understanding what culture is and how to affect it. And that's the start of the square management system.
I find that so cool though, because it's one of those things where you're selecting the people who fit and want to be there for the culture, and it's okay if you're not. And I think
That's right.
that's the the thing that I don't know if a lot of people implement that. Have you seen that be implemented heavily, or is this something that you find to be just like people just hire to hire and they don't really necessarily think about the personality, think about the skill set, think about the wants and desires of the actual employee and if they fit into the culture?
I think for those who this does occur, it happens by accident. And because the number of people who work at I've known who've worked at a best places to work and hated working there, you know, eh, and to answer your question around does this happen with the HR line, the interview process, the hiring manager is the key to this entire system working. We'll get into the constituent parts and how you put it together and what actually culture really means in the parlance of the square management system in a second. But to kind of dig in on is this being done? I don't think it is, and here's why. Um, Hiring managers will never tell you that there's a bad culture there, right? I mean, how many people who are listening to this have ever gone in for an interview and heard, "Hey, Dorian, this is a tough place to work. It takes a special kind of person to succeed here." Like that. No, that doesn't happen, right?
No.
Correspondingly, one of my favorite lines: "New employees don't start their first day disgruntled. It just doesn't happen. They come in guns ablazing. You're bright eyed. Hey, I'm going to change the world at this company." The only statistic I really will throw out there is that according to research, 50% of new hires don't make it 18 months. They either quit or they get fired. 50%. So obviously this copying best places to work, this common sized approach to culture, to organizational structure, it doesn't work. And so we're hiring for like gut feel, not to align the employee to the ways of doing. And that's where that mismatch is happening.
Man, that's such an interesting observation, because and I like to think about like I've had maybe like 20 jobs, man. Like so I've been one of the guys that have left in those 18 months, from a new hire. So I've been through a lot of it and seeing how true that is so fascinating because it's not I'm never the only one that starts and leaves around the same time. And
Well,
it's
and why is it a
typically
scarlet letter you should wear too? Because often that's the case, right? The employee holds all the power, the employer holds all the power, the employee is looked down upon. Wait a second, you only lasted a year. What did you do wrong? It's like, well, wait a second. Is that really true? I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I have a couple friends actually going through that right now where they've, been through jobs early in their career and then now it's haunting them when they're trying to get hired because it's like, well, you're only here for a year, here for 2 years, so that's an interesting thing because it could have nothing to do with them and just really they weren't aligned with what the company and the culture was doing. And I don't think that's
Yeah.
considered.
It's not considered, or they were misled, right? And there's obviously at times people put the best face forward. They want to hire the right people, and people chameleon themselves to get a job. And for the people, there's people out there who have to do that. They need a paycheck. They have kids. They have a mortgage. They have to provide for their family. I understand that. But if you have the luxury of choice, shouldn't you know maybe as an employee where you do fit and where you don't? I don't like open offices. If you said, Matt, you get a laptop and you can go find somewhere to sit, and if you need to go have a meeting, need to go find an office, I'd be like, well, that's not going to work for me. Like, I don't like that. Right. And you should know that. And
Yeah.
why would I accept that? Right. I wouldn't. And you should ask during the interview, hey, how do people go to work here? Do I have to go to work 5 days a week? Do I go one day a week? What's the options? I think people need to be more intentional. And that's the point of this book is you need to be more intentional about the ways of doing and the way you work. And then you also have to have the constitution to stick to it, both
Yeah.
as in a company, because people don't, and then as a person being like, hey, this is where I'm going to be successful. Um, the number of people who, and I've done this, who've taken a job and like, it'll work out, it'll be fine. Because it's a promotion or it's a salary increase, and it turns out to be the worst place you've ever worked. Even if you did get all the benefits, the rest of your life suffered.
Yeah. Yeah, that's far too often has that happened. Far too often does that happen. But I want to jump before the framework, though, before the book, before having this theory, this thought. What did leadership or management actually look like for you in your experience in your life? How did you see it? And to piggyback on that, how have you seen it change over time?
It's a great question. What I've noticed most management is theoretical, and it's not actually executed against. So a lot of people say, but they don't follow through or do. And so you end up getting a bit, that's where the delta occurs. You get the bait and switch, where people will say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but they don't execute against it. And I also don't think people really understand what culture is. I think a lot of people think culture is, we'll get to the framework, one side, which I call intercommunication, which is your happy hours and your first day, you get, it's the way of communicating. It's the ping pong table, right? That's one element of what a culture is. It's a component part. It's not the holistic thing. And so a lot of people say, we've got a great culture. You used to say, hey, on Thursdays, we all gather in the kitchen and we all have beers. That's great for that moment. There are actually probably some people who don't want to be forced into having a beer on a Thursday that are a little more introverted. Like there's a little bit differences there,
Yeah.
but that's what most people see it as. And they also see it as obtuse and just an outcome. And if it's an outcome, that means that your staff are actually telling you what your culture is, not the leadership team actually defining what their culture is. And that's a problem.
Yeah. Man, I never even it's funny because I laugh at the happy hour thing because we've all been there,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
the "All
Oh,
right,
I've walked into
Friday."
so many. Yeah.
Yeah, we're
So
getting,
many.
we got the cart going around, we got the popsicle cart, and it's
Yep.
like, we're in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, man, what are we doing eating
I don't want to play
popsicle?
ping pong all the time. I like it. Don't get me wrong. On vacation, I love playing ping pong, but I don't want to do it in office all the time and claim that that's good culture.
Yeah, I
We
agree.
don't understand what good culture is as a corporate entity. We talk about it. It's pushed to the side, but it is the reason that companies succeed or fail. It's the reason M&A succeeds and fails. It's a reason a lot of things go well or don't go well, and yet we tend to sidestep it and view it as a soft skill when it's actually probably the most important thing for a company.
Yeah. No, I agree so, what is culture? What is your definition of culture?
It's a great question. To me, it's a concept I've defined. It's called constrained independence. That's actually culture, and it varies in a spectrum. And it sounds harsh, caustic. Don't constrain my independence. I'm free. But at the end of the day, if Dorian, you went to a new job and you had no constraints on your independence, you could just action anything you wanted to do. That'd be chaos. Imagine if all the employees in your company just could do whatever they wanted. Wouldn't work, right? We have regulatory compliance, we have service standards, product standards. Everyone has different roles, otherwise they'd overlap. And so, in order to affect a high degree of operation efficiency, companies constrain that independence, right? That's where systems and processes and procedures come from. The degree to which you constrain someone's independence is your culture. So, culture by default is the known intentionally communicated degree to which an employee can action their own ideas. That's actually what culture is. And if you as an individual believe and like that degree of constraint, you love it. It's a great culture. And constraint can be very high, tight, or what I would call a high degree of constraint, which limits your actions and your freedoms. You're more of an execution person. And some people in this audience might say, I don't want that. Some people love that, interestingly enough. And there might be a light degree of constraint where there's more freedom to action your own ideas. And some people love that. Other people get lost in that level of freedom. And so, what the square management system attempts to do is to define the elements that create the constraints. Those are your systems, your processes, and procedures that then you can intentionally design to affect the culture that you want. And then you hire against that. And then employees, if they know that coming in, will know whether or not they adhere to the systems and processes of the company. And it's as simple as that.
That's that's such an interesting one because you're right. That is a constrained
It's
independence. Like
yeah,
it does sound a bit scary, but it sounds like what you're talking about is basically the standard of the place, the standard
it is.
of
It
it,
is.
you know?
It's actually the freedom. It's not as caustic. What it is, it's the freedom to act within known guardrails.
Yeah.
And that actually creates the high trust, high performing organization that everyone wants. Why is that? If you actually know the box or the square that you can play in, okay, you can move faster. I don't have to go, Dorian, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? You just know. But you're a faster employee because you know the decisions if they've been instructed. We'll get to the force how this works in a second. But if you've received the right level of instruction, then you know what you can action and what you can't. So if you only need to go to your manager if you're outside the box. Hey, I got an exception here. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Everything else you can action. You can also innovate inside that square because you will know the decisions you can make, the impact you can have. So you're free to kind of act in that space. When you actually can innovate, you can opine, you can influence, you feel empowered and you feel like you're part of the solution. Even if it's this small, like, hey, I did that. And people love to have some input on the success of a company. If you also know that all of your other employees are inside that square too, then you don't have many fiefdoms. You don't have all kinds of office politics. You're all on the same page. You kind of all know what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to do it, when you're supposed to do it. You're all aligned. That creates trust amongst all your employees. And when you're a faster mover, when you can innovate and be creative, when you trust your other colleagues, you become loyal. You're a happier employee. You're a loyal employee inside that box because you've got everything that you want. You have what I would call like this internal harmony. You're there. You match and off you go, and the whole company off you go. And that's actually how you create a high trust, high performing organization. You align all their systems and processes to the people, and you get everyone swimming in the same lane. And it sounds difficult. Man, I got 4,000 employees. How do I do that? This is how you do that. The book will help you identify how to do that.
Wow. Because, man, you just kind of almost kind of blew up my brain just now. Because as you were saying that, I think in real time I realized what you're saying really. It's here's here's the standard of here's what we do. This is your box.
Yeah. Yep.
You can do whatever you want in your box.
Whatever you want in the box. Yep.
Innovation, if it fits in this box, you don't have to even ask permission to do this
Right.
thing, right?
Yep.
Because I've already laid out the scope of what you can and cannot do in this box.
That's right.
And the only time that you need to go outside of the box is when there's a question of something that's not in there. And so that's when you go, you ask and things. But what you're saying, and I'm doing a research study right now about organizational commitment and effective organizational commitment. And I think this ties right into it because the leaders have given a set guideline of how to operate. I don't need, this is the standard. Fall within this standard and we're good. If you have questions about it, let's talk. Let's figure out how we can align you specifically. Man, that's so good. I think a
And
lot of
not
people
only
could
is it
take
there the
away from that.
standard, though, the key part is that you are allowed to, it's not binary. That's the key thing. It's not rigid. It's a square for a reason. There is deviation, there's variances, there's going to be different ways of slight, but they're not so obtuse that it causes problems for the company. One of the things I hear frequently around the import on this, and then this is relevant from a conversation I had the other day. And someone said, I just wish my junior staffer, there was a void and they didn't jump in and fill it. And why didn't they take the initiative and go do it? And I said, that's not a fault of the employee at all. In actuality, the employee that would have jumped to fill that void that you think is there, it might be the one who jumps to fill a void that shouldn't have been filled, that went way over and did something that they shouldn't have done because they were off the cuff and just completely not paying attention to the guardrails, right? The employee that didn't do it might actually be respecting what they believe are the guardrails that have been set for them. They said, hey, I'm not going to go over there and do this because I'm not supposed to. And maybe they could have said something, maybe they couldn't, but it's actually probably the manager who didn't provide the instruction or the training to the employee to tell them, hey, to go fix this. Right. So sometimes we actually reward bad behavior. It's like, oh, this guy's a go-getter. He went in and filled this. Oh, really? Because I don't know. There's other times where he's went way off the wall and created problems by doing something he should have done. So we have to think differently about how we value leadership and how we talk about leadership, because sometimes that quiet employee on the side is actually a really good employee. They're just following the rules.
Yeah. So talk to the leader. Talk to the leader that's listening. They're trying to figure out, hey, I have my team. They're going through the same kind of problems right now where I don't necessarily have a culture right now. I kind of have things done this way, things done that way. I kind of hire out a little bit. I don't really have employees that have been there longer than 3, 4, 5 years. How can I implement this Square management system into my business today? What are the ways that I can implement it?
That's a great question. It's designed to be actionable. I actually call it the book. It's not even a book, it's a pocket guide, on purpose, because I'm not here to throw statistics at you. I don't want you to believe it because someone, increased margin 10% or grew revenue 20%. That's not the goal. The goal is a philosophical exercise to understand a better way of doing and then allow you to pick your own organizational design, because that's all that really matters, your company. For an executive who has a mature company and they're seeing the problems that you have shown or exemplified, this is a great diagnostic. What are the four sides? How do they work? There are four sides to the square on purpose. The first side is identity. That's who you are as a company, how you define yourself, your mission, your brand personality, your core beliefs. The key question there: do people know what we stand for and why? That's both the clients and the staff. There's 10 elements on each of these four sides, and those four are all measured and scored from a high, medium, and low perspective. And the book will actually tell you what those elements are. So you're like, well, okay, I have product, for example, one element in identity is product to mission fit. How do I implement product to mission fit from a high level and low perspective? What does that mean? That book will actually help you understand the systems you'd put in place to affect that outcome by each element. So you can actually go through it and go, yeah, I'd like my company to look like that. Okay, that's a high level of constraint for identity or for this element, for low for this one. So you can pick. And that's actually gets you to the how so that you can affect the outcome you want. The second side is instruction. That is how we operate. That's the clarity and consistency of expectations. It's your onboarding protocols, your training, your knowledge transfers. The key question there for executives are roles, expectations, processes clear and scalable. The third side is the aforementioned intercommunication. That is how people interact. It's your hierarchy, it's your meeting cadence, where you report, who you report to, how you use communication tools, is your tone, for example. There are some companies that are very informal. There are some that are very formal. Some companies don't allow negativity. I've experienced that one too.
Sure, me
Uh,
too.
yeah, everything's positive, right? Um, but the key question on intercommunication is information flowing, and does it drive clarity and trust? Because sometimes the biggest problem here, obviously, is when the front line doesn't see things the same way that the executives do, right? That's a problem. And then the last side to pull this all together is information feedback. And that is how performance is measured, it's shared, it's your feedback loops, it's performance reviews, it's your operating metrics and KPIs. What does success look like? Are we learning? The key question here: are we learning and adapting fast enough to stay competitive? Are we using information to ensure the other three sides are actually working? And companies do reviews of employees somewhat well, not always. They don't review themselves very well at all, and so that this tries to reinforce that component of measurement to ensure that you're actually adhering to the system. So 10 elements per side, four sides, 40 elements ranked either from a high, medium, and low perspective, and an understanding of how those elements get executed from an operational perspective will help you intentionally design and structure your company.
Man, that I think this is such a good structure, to be very honest with you, because the these are all elements when I'm looking at them, they all coincide with each other. Like, and I think that's why I think the square management system is so it's it's actionable, like you said, because the first and I guess this is my question. If someone does feel this chaotic misalignment and they're kind of going through it, would you say the first square that they should draw from is this identity piece? Like, is that where
That's
most
where you
of the
that's where you start.
that's where
Yeah,
we
you
should
start with
start?
the identity piece, then it goes from there, because your instruction informs your identity. Because if you have a very very classic tight logo, and logos have emotive responses. If you're trying to tell the world you're an innovative design and you have a logo that looks like it's from the 1930s, it's not going to match, right? So
Yeah,
you've got to you have to start with your identity. That's really who you are. The rest of that stuff will then flow through, and are all connected, and they're designed to work that way. So the feedback loop, the information feedback loop, is the fourth eye. It's the last one on purpose because it ties the whole system together. Um, they don't need to be the same. So there are companies that have highs and lows for different elements or different sides, and that can be intent. And again, that's intentional, so that you affect the outcome that you're looking for. It's a great diagnostic tool. And then to get more into the question you asked around how to use this, if you're in a mature company, you would send this survey, the 40-point elements, and have it scored by each level of the business, executive team, senior, middle, frontline, and see where the disparity in response is. Because it'll be very obvious and very clear. You'll have a lot of consistency in some areas, and there'll be all of a sudden you'll say, wait a second, we're off on one level of instruction. And the front line is not getting trained properly. And the senior
Mm.
team, they've executed the perfect system, but it's being missed. And as a result, service standards are being dropped, right? So that is where you'd see the diagnostic. You can also use it as a way to design the company the way you want to, saying, hey, I'm not here. My company is currently scored this way. I'd like to change some things. I'd like to actually augment, this part of intercommunication and add these elements to my business and change the scoring so that you can affect a better outcome for your company, at least the way you see or want to have your company structured. And so it's a tool, especially for founders and entrepreneurs who maybe have great IP, but have never built and structured a company before. How do I put this whole thing together? This will help you understand all the systems and structures you'd want to have to affect the outcome you want for your business. And you should decide that earlier on, so you have systems in place that scale as your startup grows.
Yeah. And for our listeners that, may have misheard what he's saying, for early entrepreneurs, this is something that if you start off with this in mind, most of us, including myself as an early entrepreneur, we want to be doing this thing for a while, but not forever. So we have to build a system and a process in place to make it a scalable venture. And what he's saying is if you put these and you implement identifying who you are, your identity, and then following the square around and not forgetting the feedback part, because I think a lot that's the part that I know is falling, and I know for me as well, falling short is the feedback loop, right? What getting the feedback on how I can improve, So if you want to scale, I believe this is a beautiful framework. But if you also want to change your culture, I think, again, this is something that if you're a middle manager, if you're a leader of a small business, even a larger business, right? If you have a team that you work with, you could implement this. And the link, I'm going to make sure that we get this book to our listeners. By the time this episode comes out, the book will be out. So I'm gonna see if there's a way that I could work out, put a link of some sort. Maybe we get a QR code or something like that to get our listeners this book, because I think this is going to be a very game changing uh, system.
Appreciate
It's a
that.
very,
Yeah. The book is publishing is an interesting world. I've talked about that. It's in manuscript line edit copy review right now. Hopefully off or at some point early 2020, early to Q2 2026 is the anticipation for getting it out the door, which I'm excited about. Finally getting it released. You can learn a lot more though already around the system on my website, townsquare-advisors.com. You can actually take a free quiz, both as an individual perspective, like how do I work? What are the methods that I'm most preferential in my working environment. You can take it as an executive to get a little bit of a better feel about maybe where your company is today. And if you want to dig into the full 40-point survey and really go through all the elements, all four sides, and kind of pick and choose high level, medium, and low constraints and see what that means, you can do that on the website as well. You can also sign up for an advanced copy of the book.
it's very good. Yeah, because I think a lot of our listeners will want to probably take that survey just to see where they're at within their own structure. No, so but I know we've talked a little bit about it, but you've seen this work in the M&A environments. You've seen it work very well, where which alignment's probably the hardest in those types of environments. What's one mistake leaders make when they're trying to like merge cultures? Because I know that's an interesting game. I've been under a few mergers. So what is one mistake that you see leaders make when they're merging cultures?
Well, the interesting comment there is that the mistake is made is that they think that they can merge culture.
Mm,
And I would argue that if there is too disparate of standard there, that you shouldn't. And I've actually been, and when I was a sell side investment banker, I was in a scenario where we had a meeting We were in a sell side process. We were down to our final candidates, prospective buyers. We were in management meetings, and they dug the one acquirer dug heavily into the ways of working and the target companies' ways of doing. And they actually stopped the process after a few points. I was like, "What is going on?" I can't. They're like, "No, we're not a fit. We just this isn't going to work. The cultures are too disparate." And at the time, I was kind of like, "That's odd. That doesn't. You should just be able to. It's a good product. This fits for the acquiring entity. Why wouldn't you do this?" Now, after walking through the process, after writing the book, it's probably the best move of all time. They really clearly knew who they were as a home company and realized that this other company wasn't going to fit. And where was the disparate view? It was in going to the office and how you work. So it was very simple. It was their companies all went to work. They all had offices. They all wore suits. They all reported into this way. They had a very constrained environment. And that's what they wanted to adhere to. And they weren't going to deviate. And what I talk about in the book too is you have to have the constitution to stick to it. In a
Yeah.
negotiation, if you change your barriers and that wasn't your min is now down here, right? That wasn't the bottom line. If you deviate all the time, then you don't have culture. That's where cultures go sideways. People change all the time. They stuck to it. And that other company that they were buying, they were all, in bean bags on the floor and t-shirts and jeans, or some of them didn't even come into the office and they were like, it's not going to work. We're never going to be able to affect synergies. We're not going to be able to do this. And they walked away. And I love it. I don't think you should merge two very disparate cultures. It's not going to work unless you're okay with everyone leaving. And
Yeah.
and that happens in considerations and acquisitions. You're like, hey, I'm going to cut X amount of staff. That's okay. So you have to accept that the square that you make, it's not for everybody. And people may leave, and that is entirely okay. If you start making changes to that square, and this is what happens when new CEOs come in or private equity owners come in, they start making changes, and people go, "Whoa, this company doesn't feel like I thought it did anymore." That's because the square's changed on you. And maybe you're outside the box now in a meaningful degree than you were
Wow.
before. And people don't realize it. They're like, oh, these are terrible leaders. They're not terrible leaders. They have a different way of doing. You just may not like that way of doing. And that's why you leave. And that's okay. And the private equity company is probably like, I'm okay with that because I'm going to have my box over here now.
Yeah.
And so when you acquire a company in M&A, the fool's errand is believing that you can affect that culture change. I don't believe that you can. And if you are going to make the change, you have to anticipate a meaningful degree of loss of employee. And if you account for that, then do it.
That's such a insightful perspective, right? Because I'm not in that world, but I've been a part of mergers and I've been a part of teams coming into different teams and now we're all one team and all these things and I can see this there's such a difference in the way that people move and operate that come from these other places. And I and then we try to, you know, implement like our culture because now they're under our umbrella. And that doesn't necessarily work. And that it's funny that you talk about the turnover because that every time I've seen it, there has been some sort of turnover because just things have changed for them,
Right.
you know?
And that should be viewed as okay. And if someone does leave, they're not a negative person. It's not a bad outcome. They just said, hey, I don't like this environment anymore. My world has changed. I'm not happy with that. I'm going to go find a better environment. And that's okay. We should be able to have that choice and not wear a scarlet letter that says, Matt's a bad employee because he didn't like the changes. It's probably me having the constitution to stick to what I know and I like and not chameleoning myself. You hear that term all the time, come into the family, and I kind of just roll my eyes a little bit. I'm like, well, yeah, everyone's family's different, the drunkle and, the credit card happy aunt and all that. These are businesses and they should be run that way. So
Do you know my family, Matt? What did you just say? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But that was funny. But I want to ask you, was there a time that you didn't fit in the culture?
100%.
Talk to
Oh,
me about that.
100%.
How did that shape how you think about it today?
I made the mistake of going, it'll work out. Don't worry
Mm,
about it. I knew going into it. I was told. I remember talking to a couple of people. I called and said, "Hey, what do you know of this company?" And they're like, "Matt, I know you. I
mm.
don't think you're gonna work out there. I know that company. It's you're this. You're over here. They're over here." And I'm like, "You're not gonna fit that culture." And I was like, "No, but it's a chance for me to do this, and it was a career opportunity to do that." I'm like, raise this and it'll work out. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. I can I can suck it up for, X, Y, and Z couple of years. Wrong move. Completely wrong move. I didn't fit. And the people who worked there had been there forever, and they're great, and there's some of them are still there, and it's a really high performing company. It's not a bad company at all. And we just didn't align on how we did stuff. And I think it's also part of what helped me write this book and see things that way, see things differently, was me going, how did I work out here? How did I not work out there? How did my friend who's like me not, maybe he isn't as much like me as I thought he was, even though he's my friend. We didn't work out. I loved it. He hated it. How did all those things happen? How did we end up in this circumstance around culture? And a lot of what I had done with the Square management system was from my earlier days in my management experience, where I needed a system to manage people, and I had no MBA at the time, and I had no training in management. I was just learning on my own. And I said, okay, if I give you this box and you stay in it, then I don't have to manage you because I got too many people to manage. Just come to me when you're outside the box. That's how it started. I didn't know I wasn't doing that exactly that way at the time,
Yeah.
but that's what actually framed my answer to the interview question. Was that's the practice I took, and it worked, and it works now. And that's why I know it's got a lot of validity, because I've seen it help me manage people and help create standardization with a degree of variance that allowed people to move faster. And so I spent the first, I don't know, 10, 11 years of my career eh, leveraging the system in a way, unknowingly leveraging the system that I wrote on paper.
Wow. That's a good, I mean, that's actually a really good way to start this kind of journey for you. You know what I mean? Like, just like, yeah, dad, just do this, stay in this. I got other stuff I got to do right now. But it's like, you're not thinking about it, because you're just moving. It's very new to you. But I love how it just sparked from an idea that was just like, "No, I think if you just stay here in this box, you'll be great." Like, I love that because it's simple. It is a very simple approach to managing or leading others without, the burnout of having to be in every single thing that everyone is doing, and I think that's, uh, the advantage of it.
Yeah, you don't have to micromanage. Or you
Yeah.
do if you want to. If you want to micromanage, the system will allow you to do that. Right? If you want to micromanage, you want to create a really tightly constrained environment where people have to execute. You can do that. You just have to understand that not a lot of people like that, but
Yeah.
some people do want to just be told what to do. So there is a difference there. Yeah, it came out of a unique experience, and along the way, the trigger, of course, was the recruiter who just said you should do something with that, and I started to apply it. There's always a degree of imposter syndrome. You're right; it's simple, and if you actually walk through the 40-point elements, some of them in isolation sounds almost too simple. One of them actually is promotional items, and whether or not when you show up on your first day, do you get a basket of goods? And do people walk around your office with shirts and logos? Because I've been places where people were brand ambassadors from day one. You show up and I've got shirts and jerseys and backpacks and mouse pads. I'm like, oh, Jesus, there's all kinds of stuff. And then other places were like, well, if you want to go buy something like a water bottle, we have a team store online. You can go pay for it. So you want me to pay for my own work Okay. And then
Yeah.
other places were like, we don't have any of it, and that actually does play a meaningful role in how people view their working environment. Do you make your office your home and have pictures and frames, or is your office this stale medicinal, and I've seen people love both.
Yeah.
So all those things in isolation, simple to your point, in aggregate, are what actually affects the culture in your company.
I love that. What question do you wish more CEOs, business leaders would ask themselves before blaming culture?
Oh, do I even know what my culture is?
Mm.
Actually, because I think the actual culture is way different. And the reason I say that is because most companies don't have a complete square. Most companies let their employees define what the culture is, as opposed to having the staff, the executive staff actually define it.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's like like laziness? Do you think it's just not knowing? Like, why do you think that that is the case typically?
Not knowing in time. A lot of people they're so worried about hitting next quarter that they're not really paying attention to the other stuff, when in reality, they need to stand back a little bit and pay attention to the other stuff first. Because you'll never scale if you don't have the systems and processes and procedures in place. One of the things in M&A especially is, people are paid for their ability to affect future growth. And part of that confidence comes in having the scalable systems, process, and procedures to allow for scale. If you don't know where you're going, or that's one thing. That's the vision, the strategy. But if you can't affect that outcome, that's another. And I've seen a lot of executives fall on the back of not knowing how they're going to affect that outcome, and or think that they can and can't because they don't have the culture in place to do it. And that's the biggest problem I see. They just A lot of companies don't understand the how, and that's why this book is meant to be a pocket guide. It's meant to be actionable. It's meant to be implemented. It's not theoretical. It's theoretical in theory in terms of how you do it, but then you immediately dig in and start applying it to put the systems in place. I wish more executives said, I can intentionally affect the culture of my company as opposed to letting it be a default.
Yeah, so for someone listening right now, trying to realign their culture, what's the first small step that they should take this week? Is it to like I'm gonna let you answer that actually. I'm not gonna.
It's the diagnostic. It's one is, what do I want my company to look like? And then what is my company actually? And the system's meant to be used both ways so that you can understand. A lot of people don't even understand that the whole sum of parts that get you to this. And I am sure that if people who are going to go on there and look at the 40 points and they're going to go, hey, I think there should be 50. Go ahead, add more. That's fine. Like, go add more elements that you want to put in place. I've given everyone 10 on each side to start it. But if you want to augment it, go ahead. But at least have four sides. Companies don't have four sides. They have incomplete parts, or they have mini squares, mini fiefdoms. Finance is doing this thing. Marketing's over here with this system. Sales is over here doing this, right? And so they've got all these disparate performance levels, these different standards. I've been part of that. I remember one place I worked, finance department had to show up 5 days a week. Everyone else in the company had to show up 1 to 2. Finance people were dropping like flies. They were
Yeah,
all upset. And so you can't have that. You can't have that level of disparity in a company. It's got to be harmonious to affect that culture outcome. So use it as a diagnostic, survey everyone, get the answer, figure out where you have the problems because it'll help you identify where the problems are, and then understand what you want it to be. And then you can start making the changes. Hey, we have got product to mission bear problems. The market doesn't understand why we bought this company. It's way off. Our mission statement says X and we bought a company over here. Maybe we should change our mission statement. If we change our mission statement, do we have to then change our logo and some of our brand messaging? Probably. Okay, well, and they're all connected. And that's why there's
yeah,
10 elements in there. They're all connected. And then the instruction to your staff has to matter. Look at Cracker Barrel. Perfect example of a company that didn't understand their identity properly. Made a change and communicated it, but didn't understand the magnitude of that change
yeah,
because they hadn't understood the product mission fit, right? Their mission was effectively their brand, their logo was old school heritage,
yeah.
and they went modern, and everyone revolted, said, "This isn't a modern company. We don't want to be modern." And so that's why identity is the perfect place to start too.
Man, so good. If you could put one sentence from your book on every office wall in the world, what would it be? If what just one sentence from your book,
It's
what
a
would you
great,
say?
great it's a great question. And off the cuff, I would say the one thing that you should do is, have we intentionally designed a high trust, high performing company? And I think the key part of that statement is intentional and design, because it is yours to affect. That high trust, high performing is yours to affect. That outcome is your responsibility as an executive. And it's not a derivative. It's not just an outcome that happens. It's a lot of people sit there and say, well, we've created the best widget. Great. Do you have the best company? Probably
Yeah.
not. Maybe not. So that's what I would say.
I love that. I mean, and that's the beauty of like leadership done intentionally, right? Like when you do things intentionally, you can actually implement real systems, that outlast the different personalities that come in, the different people that roll in, because you now are finding what's aligned with your system, with your procedures, with your processes. And I like that because I'm going to just start calling it SPP because I really like systems, procedures, processes. Like it's such a good way to look at literally anything, like even your just day-to-day life. And again, I'm a systems guy. My mind works like an engineer, science practitioner at heart. So that's how my mind works. And so systems speak to me, um, but they outlast the culture culture's not a vibe, like, and I know we spoke about that before where we were like, it's not a vibe that you just feel, and if that's the case, that's what your employees are doing. Really, it's what have you implemented that stands the test of time? Yeah,
Yeah. I think you said something meaningful is in terms of this leadership. And I think leadership is the leadership's role and responsibility, at least when I've been in managing companies and places, it's my job to ensure that every employee can feed their family, to provide a roof for their family, and also have their hopes and desires met, right? Their career and personal and professional objectives met. Leadership is not the motivational speaker and the guy who stands up and does rah rah, because a lot of people can do that. It's not someone who just has their own a vision board and starts throwing out crazy ideas and says, we should go here. Are you intentionally affecting the outcome to create the high performance, high trust environment that's going to allow for your employees to succeed, to be happy at work, to receive bonuses and benefits, to increase in pay, all that kind of stuff that comes with it? You will never get there if the how is not there. And I think, again, that you asked, like, what do I see? But I've been an investment banker on the sell side. I acquire businesses all the time. Started a business, I manage them. The underlying causality behind failure and alignment is the how. The how goes way off. And all these ideas at the top that never get executed properly or don't have the systems to be executed properly, that fall apart, cause disarray and discomfort. The how is the key to leadership, to affecting a high growth, high performance company.
Matt, I appreciate you joining me, brother. This was such a good, insightful conversation. I think the our listeners got a lot from it. I know I got a lot from it. I took a lot of notes. I'm a note taker, so it might look like chicken scratch. I'll even show you here.
Oh,
My
I love it.
chicken
I'm a writer
scratch.
too. I love writing. I'm old school. I write all my
Yeah,
notes down too.
it's such a fun thing, and I'm an index card guy too. So like I wrote the framework, and I'm gonna look at it, kind of work through it because I think these are things that not only and not only can leaders use this, but to the everyday person that doesn't even want to be a leader, what we're talking about is a system that you could implement. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, and you could actually implement in your everyday life, right? Because once you identify the type of person you want to be, you can then figure out, get the clarity and the consistency and the next step, and I'm going to read here, then intercommunication, right? That's talking to the people that are around you. To me, that's the 5 people you hang around most, right? And I think that's a very, very important thing, and we talk about it a lot on this pod where the 5 people you hang around most is, you hang around 5 broke people, you'll be the 6th. I've heard that quote a long
It's
time,
true.
but I use that because it's the truth, And then the last part, feedback. That feedback, you have to be open to feedback. And I think a lot of times, especially in this very sensitive world we live in today where things are taken as criticism more often than it is feedback, I think if you're hearing this, if you're listening to this, s- let's reframe a little bit. Reframe how you're seeing what people are saying to you or about you, because you could be implementing these things to be a better person,
That's right.
to move into your identity. So I want to end it with that because I want the listener that isn't a middle manager, a leader or something, to also understand that they could take this away and implement it into their own life.
That's right. This is a symbiotic relationship. We're talking around the executive in the company, but the individual can use this too. And it is extremely helpful for the individual employee. I know it's helped me better understand where I'm going to be successful as an employee. You can take that free quiz on my website as an individual, and everyone who's taken it goes, yeah, I wanted to write X, but in reality it was Y. It's only 10 questions. It's free. And people like write me back. They're like, I wanted to, I thought it was an X, but I'm really a Y. I had to force myself to answer. I'm like, answer honestly. Answer honestly. It'll change your perspective of how you work, and it might give you some tips on how to help you improve your working environment.
Yes, yes, and the link will be in the description, the show notes, wherever you're listening to the podcast. The it will be in there. But repeat it for our listeners if they're driving or if they want to do something. Repeat the website for them.
Sure, it's townsquare-advisors.com.
Townsquare-advisors.com. Leaders, I appreciate you joining me and Matt for another episode of Think Like a Leader. I really do appreciate any time that you do tune in. It really is a pleasure of mine. Matt, thank you for joining me. I think this has been such a great conversation, and I'm excited to get this episode out there for the people that really need it.